Good morning, class. I want to thank God for this time. I want us to continue from where we stopped. The last time we met, we are looking at the African traditional belief in life after death. Then we looked at the death rituals, which I'm not going to repeat today. And we also looked at the causes of death. Today, we want to continue from where we stopped. And what are we going to look at? We are going to look at a number of issues still in African traditional society. And today we are going to begin by looking at sorrow, expressing sorrow of death in African traditional society. After someone has died, how do people express their sorrow in African traditional society? How do they express sorrow? That is the question. And today we are going to look at how the Africans expressed sorrow. By the way, different cultures looked at sorrow in different ways. They expressed that sorrow in different ways. If you went among the Waganda, you realize that when someone died, they would wail loudly. You have been so good. They will start showing very many things, crying when they're expressing you have been very kind, or where have you left us, and so many like that. There are some cultures, when people died, they would sing. They would sing songs, move around, wailing, and so forth. There are some people, when they died, they would sort a cow, if you sort a cow and people eat and feast. There are some people, they would do so many things. And all that were forms of expressing sorrow. Now, expressing sorrow of death in African traditional society, how do they express it? And that's where we are going to move today. So today we are going to look at, there's a question, usually I want to have the guiding question. Explain how the Africans grieved or mourned after losing a loved one. That is the question we are looking at. The points we are going to look at under this topic are going to can be used to answer such a question. Explain how the Africans grieved or mourned after losing a loved one. The following are the ways people in African traditional society mourned after someone dying. If someone died in African traditional society, how did people react? How did they mourn? How did they mourn? So we are looking at that and answering that question. Point number 1, they used to cry and weep for the loss of the family members. This was caused by the physical separation. People used to cry. The Baganda, by the way, are very good at crying. They would cry and wail, let's say, wa omuntu waffe, twatwadde tukwagala nnyo, ndekeddaani, so many things. The crying and the weeping was very common among very many tribes. That was one way someone, in fact, if someone died and you didn't cry, then they would think maybe you are happy. It looked up, even if you didn't like someone, you'd at least try to cry so that you show that you are mourning the dead. To show sorrow, you express sorrow for the death of the. So, in fact, if you didn't cry, then the people will have very many question marks about you. Secondly, the Africans could sing and dance upon the death of a person. Some Africans could sing and dance upon the death of a person. The song contained the sad message which helped people to reflect on life. People would dance, and if you went to the West Nile, if they lose a dear one, they would sing moving around the compound. And those songs have messages of sad messages. They had messages which showed that they are sad, they were expressing sadness, and helped people to reflect, maybe add on reflect upon death. So some people could sing and dance. And a very good example among the Lugbara. If you are taking note, take note of that. The Lugbara is from West Nile, and the Madi in the West Nile, they would sing when someone died. So that's how they used to express their sorrow. They would sing the whole night. Even these days, by the way, when you look at our present situation, especially among the Christians, when someone dies and you're mourning, people sing. People sing, only that they don't sing traditional song, but they sing Christian songs. When they sing these Christian songs, they are trying to console. These songs are songs of consolation. So we are saying that people would sing. Even in our Christian system, we sing. If I'm a Christian and someone died and we're having a night vigil, we sing songs which make us have hope, which strengthen us. There are some songs which are very good. Then another point, in some cultures, people could suspend their daily activities like cultivation. Among the Acholi, work was suspended for 3 days in the event of death of a man, and 4 days for the women in his case, just to show respect for the dead. Now, some people, if someone died, what would they do? They would make sure they don't work. Even these days, by the way, if you are in a rural setting, if a neighbor lost a relative or someone, and they see you in the garden, they look at you as a witch. They expect you, if someone has died on the village, you don't go to the garden. People should not see you with a hoe going to dig. So what you do, it was one of mourning. When people lose a dear one, they don't dig. And we say that, for example, among the Acholi, work was suspended for 3 days in the event of death of a man and 4 days for the women. To respect the dead, you suspend work like cultivation, you suspend it. Even in my culture, when you lose a dear one, you don't wake up and go to dig. No, you spend some days without digging as a sign of mourning. So mourning was, people express sorrow by suspending work. People showed sorrow by suspending work to show that they are mourning the what? The dead. So in your culture, what do you do? When someone dies, do you go ahead and dig? Is it normal business or you suspend? And I think even in our modern society, that's why sometimes they have to give us some work, some off days if you lose a dear one, because they expect you to mourn that dead. How do you mourn the dead? You mourn the dead by not doing the work. The normal, you don't take things to be normal. Things a bit different. You have lost your parent. The following day, you can't go to the garden. You have to mourn for some days before you resume the normal what? Before you resume the normal work. So, members, I don't know how you do it in your culture. How do you do it? How do you do it? If you're not cultivators, maybe for example, how do you mourn? Does business move normally, or you do something about it? You suspend it for some time. And I think that is being humane. By suspending it, it is being humane. So we have seen the 3 points. Number one, they used to cry and weep for the loss of the family member. This was caused by physical separation. The second one, we see that they used to sing and dance upon the death of someone, and they would share in those songs there was sad messages which help people to reflect on life. Then the third one, they could suspend their activities like cultivation so that they mourn the dead. In fact, by suspending, they are mourning the dead. Another point we can also look at is animals were slaughtered. Chicken, chicken, goats, cattle. This was where people overcome sorrow caused by death. And members, Africans believe that if the head, for example, the head of family has died, these animals cannot continue enjoying life. If a head of the family has died, they have to slaughter a chicken or a goat or a cattle, whatever is available, it has to be slaughtered. You can't keep it. You have to slaughter it so that life moves on. So they slaughtered to overcome sorrow because people have to eat, they will eat and overcome sorrow. In some cultures, people would smear dead bodies with white clay. And this one is common among the Maasai. They would smear dead bodies with white clay. It was to bid them farewell. They bid them farewell. Sometimes this smearing could also be among the people who are mourning themselves to show that they are mourning. So they will smear dead bodies, but sometimes they also smear themselves so that it shows that they are mourning. Another point is in some cultures they would abandon their homestead and shift to another place. Among the Maasai, the old home was considered to be cursed by the gods. Now, in some cultures, like people, the nomadics, among the Bahima, among the Karamajong, among the Maasai, when someone died, they would mourn by shifting to another. After burying, they will shift to another place, especially those nomads. Why? They are expressing sorrow. They feel they cannot stay in a home where the dear one has died. So they will, after burial, they'll move away and go to another area and put up their home. Nomads usually don't have permanent houses. They have uh, they have temporary houses which can be constructed. So they will move to another area. They will shift to another area and stay there because they feel that that home where someone has died has been cursed by God. It's a cursed place. So they feel that if you stay there any longer, the other people are going to die. So some cultures would abandon their homestead and shift to another place. Another way of mourning among the Maasai, all pots in the home were broken to show that the life of the family member had come to an end. Now, if you are among in some cultures, some utensils would be broken. The pots would be broken if you have any pot, because people used to use pots for cooking. They would destroy the pots. They would break them to show that the member of the family member's life has come to an end. So that family member would go with the pots in the family, those broken pots. They'll break them, and after all, they were going to shift to another area. They'll shift and get new ones. But it was a sign of mourning among the Africans. Lighting fire the whole night was also done in some societies, like the Baganda, because the mourners would spend the whole night awake. Even right now, by the way, among the Baganda, we still bring firewood and put them in the compound. And people sleep around that fire. They will light fire the whole night. And sometimes when you are moving, you realize that if you see a home where you see that is ash, firewood, fire in the compound, just know that there's someone who has died in that family. It is one way of mourning the dead. Lighting fire the whole night, and people around there. There are some people who sleep around the fire. All that showed that people are mourning. It is a sign of mourning. That light there, that fire there, showed that people are mourning. In some societies, sexual intercourse were suspended up to when the time of mourning is over. Among the Basoko of Uganda, sex was associated with pleasure, and therefore it could not be done at the time of mourning. For example, now if people are married, the married people were not supposed to have normal sexual relations, husband and wife. They were not supposed to have them. They had to be suspended. They had to be suspended for some time. There was a time of mourning. If, for example, you have lost a child, you have to mourn. So you'll suspend all the activities. You'll suspend all the activities until a particular time, maybe for a month, maybe for weeks. This will help someone to recover because it was taken as pleasure. Now, do you have to enjoy pleasure when people are mourning? Do you have to enjoy pleasure when someone has died? No. So some businesses were suspended for some time. And when they are suspended, what happens? When they are suspended, you are mourning. Then after some time, life goes on. Life continues normally. So in some societies, sexual intercourse were suspended up to when the time of mourning was over. And I've given here an example. Among the Wasoko of Uganda, sex was associated with pleasure, and therefore it could not be done at the time of mourning. So we realize that how do you do that in your culture? How do you do that in your culture? Is it the same? Because even as we talk about this, we have to know what is taking place in our culture. Does such things still take place or not? Okay. Does it still take place or not? If it is not taking place, yes. Does it take place in your culture? Members, when we started these things, I want you to do research in your cultures. What is taking place in your culture? Is it the same case? Take time and ask your parents. Take time and ask your grandparents. In our culture, how do the people mourn the dead? And they'll be telling you those answers. And we usually want examples from your cultures. Another point, people were required to dress in a particular fashion. When you're mourning, among the Baganda, the widow had to wear pieces of black cloth on the head and in her waist. While among the Bagishu, women tied leaves on their heads and in their waist. It was one way of mourning. People were required to dress in a particular fashion. People were required to dress in a particular fashion. If you went and saw people putting on back clothes tying the piece of backcloth in the waist, tying a piece of cloth on the head, just to know someone is mourning a dead. Especially that if someone lost a husband, the wife had to put on a backcloth. The children had to tie on their heads. And we have seen that among the Jews, they tied leaves on their heads. All that was to show that they are mourning the dead. So members, if they ask you such a question, how did Africans mourn the dead? Those are some of the answers we can give to show that the Africans mourned the dead through those ways which we have just mentioned. So that is that. I want us to move on to something else. And here, the last time we met, we are looking at death rituals. And we said there are so many things. They buried people with the property. They did this and that. They lighted candles. They put oil in their mouths. And we want to look at some of these. I wanted us to bring out this because I think we missed out the other time. But briefly, I want us to look at some of the reasons why some of these rituals were carried out. It's reasons for carrying out or performing death rituals. I think we didn't bring it out. We looked at the death rituals, but the reason death rituals were intended to send the spirit of the dead peacefully in the next world. This was done by offering sacrifices. Now, there are some people, when they died, they would even offer sacrifices. Why did they offer sacrifices? Death rituals were intended to send the spirit of the dead peacefully. So by offering sacrifices, they were appeasing the spirits of the dead. They were appeasing the spirits of the dead. And how were they appeasing the spirits of the dead? By making sure they have offered sacrifices. So death rituals were intended to send the spirits of the dead peacefully in the next world. This was done by offering sacrifices. So the reason why they offered sacrifices as a ritual was to send the spirit of the dead peacefully to the next world. Next, death rituals were intended to help the spirit of the living dead set among its ancestors. Members, the other time I told you that when people died in African traditional society, they were supposed to go and settle among the ancestors. And that's the reason why the Baganda have a Bijja, burial grounds. Why? Because they believe that all people in that family should be together. When they are burying, they bury you on those burial ground. Among the Baganda, they call it a Bijja. So they don't take your body anywhere. They take you to a Bijja. Bijja in Masaka. They take you to Masaka. So, set among its ancestors. So they will make the spirits not only to settle by burying the body at the Bijja, but they are supposed to settle even in spiritual wise. These rituals were intended to help the spirit of the living dead to set among its ancestors. Among the Bantu tribes in Uganda, they all have good burial grounds. And by the way, even when these people died, they will speak to them. If there are some great-grandparents who have died, they will say, when you go, send greetings to Jaja so-and-so who died so many years ago. Send greetings. They mention those ancestors who are already there. So send ancestors, these rituals were intended to make you settle, because they will send you, greet our father who died, greet our singer who died, greet our grandparent who died. So they will send words. Tell them life is not good. Tell us so and so people are suffering. The grandchildren are suffering and so forth. So this person will definitely go and settle among the ancestors of that family. Death rituals were to help recognize the living dead. Death rituals were to help recognize the living dead as being part of the family. Members, there are some rituals which shows that these people who have died are still part of the family. And what are those rituals? Among the Basoga, the names of the dead are given to the newborn in the family. That is a ritual. Why are they naming after the dead, children, newborn babies after the dead? Because they want them to be recognized that they are still part of the family. Another ritual which made people to think that these dead people are still part of the family is they used to bury in the courtyard in some cultures. One time I went to Mbale. Was it in Mbale? And there are some families I visited. And the first thing you would see in the family would be a grave in the courtyard near the house. And then people, I will ask, why are these people, why don't you, among the Waganda, by the way, they don't put the dead bodies near the house. They take them to a bija. Bija is usually some few meters away from the main house. But among the Bajishu, if someone is the head of the family, if a man dies in the family, in the compound, that's where they bury. Among the Samia, someone is buried in the compound. Why are they doing that? Because they believe that this person is still part of the family. So if you put him far, it is as if you are isolating him. So they will make sure those ritual of burying people in the family graveyard, naming after people, was to show that the dead people are still part of the family. The rituals were intended to show the spirit's solidarity and togetherness even after death. The rituals were intended to show the spirit's solidarity and togetherness even after death. Some of these people, when they died, there are so many rituals which were performed. We looked at them the other time. But what was it intended to? To show that we still have that solidarity with the people who have died. They are still part of us. We show solidarity and togetherness. That even if people die, we still have that solidarity. Now, in some cultures, there are some people, if it is husband and wife, before they bury the body, they will have sex with the body. If it is a man, will have sex with his wife. If it is a woman, will have sex with the husband when they are dead. Why is it so? Because they wanted to show that they are still together. Even if someone has died, they are still moving together. But those are cultures which are dying away these days. They used to be there some time back in some African cultures to show that they are still together. So that one was very some of the rituals were intended to thank people who had helped in making funeral arrangements. You know, some rituals were made to thank people who have helped in the funeral arrangement, burial arrangement. I'll give an example. In very many tribes, African tribes, when people have lost a dear one, they bring beer. People take bowls. People take spirits like waraji. People take beer, all kinds of beer. They bring it and people mourn while drinking. It is one way of mourning someone, but at the same time, it is one way of thanking people who have helped in making. Now, if you are in the village and someone has died, you realize that someone has died, yes, but at the same time, there are people who are going to bring food. In some cultures, people bring food. They bring food, they dig their grave, they do work, they cook, and many other things. So how can you say thank you to them? Sometimes the people would buy beer. For example, among the Waganda, people who dug the grave were given alcohol. And it's a must. If you dig the grave, there is some alcohol for people who have dug the. It is a ritual. And people don't even ask so many questions. They know that if once you dig they take it as a ritual. But what is the intention? Is to thank them for the good. Because digging a grave is not something very easy, by the way. It is not easy. Another point is some condolences were given to the family of the dead. For example, contribution of money and property were given to the family of the dead among the Bemba in Zanzibar. Now, there are some of these things which are brought. Money was to show condolence. That was the significance. Among the Baganda, they call it amabugo. Amabugo is broad. Sometimes they bring food. These days in our villages, people bring food, they bring sauce, some bring beans, others bring meat, others bring matoke, others bring so many things. Others bring money. Now, what was the purpose of this money and property? It was to show condolence. To show condolence. That is the purpose. To show that we are grieving, we are mourning with you. We are sorry. We have been touched by the loss you have experienced in your family. So, some rituals were to show condolences. Another, the rituals were intended to bring back to life, to normal. Rituals were intended to bring back life to normal in society. Now, if someone has died, definitely there are so many things which go wrong. People are mourning, many people come around, many people are mourning with you. There's a lot of burial arrangements, burial activity taking place, and so many. So rituals were intended to bring back life to normal in society. For example, among the Baganda, people could sing songs and dance to overcome sorrow, especially on the last funeral rite. After the last funeral rite, things would go back to normal. And on this last funeral rites, that's when they would mourn, sing, dance, and they put the air. And at the end of the day, life is being brought back to normal. No more crying. In fact, after the last funeral rite, you are not supposed to cry. Why? Someone who has died has been replaced. If there's an heir put, then you don't need to cry. Otherwise, if you cry, you're a witch. You want to bring bad luck so that the heir can die. So it was supposed to bring back life to normal. People have been mourning. In some cultures, people were one way people will mourn, they will not bathe. In fact, you can add it there and that how the Africans used to mourn the dead. You can tell some people it took time without bathing. Women will not bathe, men will not bathe when someone has died. They'll take some 2-3 days without bathing. And that shows that they were mourning. They'll not comb hair. Others will cut off their hair to show that they are mourning. Those are the 2 points we left out the other end. But we shall add them there. Or you can add them there. So rituals were intended to bring back life to normal. If they've carried out the last funeral rite, then life goes back to normal. No more crying, no more anything. Now, I want us to look at, there's a video clip I want us to look at. It is trying to depict some people from West Africa. When we talk about African traditional society, we don't only talk about Uganda. We talk about Africans. So I came around this video clip. In this video clip, we see the people in West Africa. Is it Ghana, Algeria, Nigeria, around there, the West African country? Now for them, as I told you that some people still looked at these dead people as part of the family. And sometimes they will speak words to these dead bodies to take to the ancestral world. So we are going to look at this small short video clip about how some Africans in the West Africa were mourning the dead. They were speaking to the dead body. They were sending words. They were dressing it up to look as if it is still alive. The way they were treating it as if someone was still alive. So feel free to watch this video clip as we continue. I don't know whether you can get the voice, the volume. But someone is trying to explain how those culture, this person was dead. And you see that lady, These people were crying at the same time they are speaking some words to this dead body, saying, and you see this password, some people are even using the fly whisk to, you see that woman is talking to the dead body. Some are crying, but they are keeping the body for some time. The pictures there, everything. Hmm? Some they were even giving the body the wishes they could take to the ancestral world, so that when he reached there, the problems can be sorted. So those women were celebrating the death of the king, but at the same time, uh, let me hope you have the volume was there where we. So I want to move on. Now, lastly, as we look at the African traditional view of unending life, we can't miss out the importance of ancestors, because ancestors are the living dead. All Africans know that when people die, when our great parents, grandparents die, when our parents die, they become ancestors. Now, what was the importance of ancestors in African traditional society? Were ancestors, because the ancestors are the living dead. If you have family members who died long time ago, those automatically become ancestors. So what is the importance of ancestors in African traditional society? We are looking at, now we are saying that these are sometimes called the living dead and have the following importance. We are looking at the importance of the ancestors. They are the living dead. They are dead, but the Africans believe they are not dead. You know very well there's a saying which says that according to the African traditional society, the dead are not dead. They are still living. So they are called the living dead. Someone died but is still alive. In the spiritual world, so those people are living dead spiritually. Physically, they might have died, but spiritually, they are still alive. Now, point number one, they acted as advisors to the living. Those ancestors, the living would always consult them, arriving to any decision. They acted as advisors to the living. Members, Africans, whenever they had to make a serious decision, they would consult their ancestors. As I told you, every African had a heart, because these living dead were considered part of the family. So they would construct for them a hut near the main house, where they will make offerings. That's where they will go and speak to them. That's where they will share their food. The Africans will take beer there in those shrines, because that's where they believe that these ancestors would stay. So sometimes they would go there in those ancestral huts, and they speak and say, "You so and so, we want to inquire this and this. Please, what can we do?" Then these ancestors would come and give them direction in form of dreams. They'll dream them. These people would dream. Then they will instruct them what to do, and those are advising, and that's advising the living. So they acted as advisors to the living. The living would always consult them, arriving at any decision, and will act accordingly. They will answer them. They will go in those huts, they make sacrifices and ask what they should do. And they will answer by either in dreams, or those spirits would haunt someone, and that someone will give them the answer. So they acted as advisors to the living. Secondly, they acted as mediators between the living and the dead. So in case of requests by the living, the ancestor will deliver it to God. In fact, whenever people wanted to make requests to God, they will pass through their mediators. The way Christians pass through Jesus. I pray this, Lord, I pray for this in Jesus' name. Even these Africans prayed to God through the ancestors. So the ancestors acted as mediators between the living and the dead. So in case of the request by the living, the ancestors would deliver it to God. I'll give an example also to the Catholic Church. If you have the Catholic people here, you realize that there are some saints in which the Catholics pray to their God. There are some Catholics who pray to their God, and they say, I have Jude Tadeo, I have Mary, Holy Mary, I have these saints. Sometimes people even have the martyrs. They pray through to their God. So these mediators, so they act as mediators. So the same way people would pray through these ancestors. So ancestors acted as mediators. Another point we can also look at is they united the living as people always united when offering sacrifices to their ancestors. And this was common among the Baganda and the Basoga. They united the living. Now, some of you have family meetings. I know of a family where they have one day in a year where they go and worship their ancestral spirits in their family. Among the Baganda here, people kusamira, they can choose a day where all family members come to kusamira. And when they kusamira, what is involved in kusamira? They speak to their ancestral spirits. Now, usually it unites the whole family. That's why they say that it was important, because it used to unite all people from different families in that clan. And they come together. Because as they pray to their ancestral spirits, as they offer sacrifices, they will come as a group, as a family. So it brought unity in the family members. Sometimes we have families, even extended families, but never at one time do we unite to greet each other, to know more about each other. Some people don't. But these ancestors used to unite people because they would come together as a common family to worship their ancestors. So it brought unity among the family members. Then we can also say they settled. I think there's a missing word. It should be they settled. They settled conflicts or problems of the living. In case of problems like famine, drought, the living offered sacrifices to the ancestors, and they would avert such situation. Now, these ancestors will help to solve problems. I'll give an example. If there is a famine, according to the Africans, those famine don't come by themselves. The famine come because there is a problem somewhere in the spiritual world. Maybe the ancestors are not happy. Emizimu minyivu. So famine comes. When there is drought, it is not raining for a long time, you're expecting rain is not coming. Sometimes it is those spirits which are not happy. They are annoyed. Sometimes there are so many calamities, diseases, people are dying, funny death. It is because the ancestral spirits may not be happy. So how did the ancestral spirits help to solve problems? Sometimes they will tell the living people what to do. Sometimes they will tell them to slaughter a goat, to give sacrifices, to do this and that, and then the problems would go away. They would avert such situation after the living people have fulfilled what the ancestors have told them. So in other words, they sorted conflicts. And in such a situation, when you sort conflicts, then life will be happy. They will be happy. People will be happy. They promoted good health. Since people who were living would dream of herbs that would cure them, of a number of diseases. Members, this ancestral spirit could also direct people what to do when they are sick. Members, if you usually watch television and these programs of herbalists. There are some herbalists who will tell you, my senga, jaji sanga, so and so, senga kulanama, senga, those people who sell drugs. Now, these people always claim that they got the inspiration of being herbalist by their grandparents or their aunties or their parents. They inspired them to cure diseases. These people sometimes have even not gone to school, but they are very good herbalists. And they tell you, my jaja was a herbalist. And after when he died, he told me to take over. How do they take over? These ancestral spirits help them to direct them what to do. Sometimes through dreams, they tell them, get this herb and go and treat someone. And by the way, many times people who take up their dirty business, that work of treating with herbs, is because you don't just come out of the blue and you become a herbalist. You must have an attachment to the grandparents who was a herbalist, and then you also become. Why? Because these grandparents will guide you, will make you even dream some of the herbs. So they promoted good health. If people had sicknesses which were not curing, this ancestral spirit will make people dream the herbs to use. And they will get them and they will cure people. So they promoted good health. Another one, they would maintain peace and stability by punishing the lawbreakers and sometimes rewarding those who had done well. Members, we have told you that the ancestors were the living dead. They were, much as they were dead, but they were living, and they would watch. If you did something wrong, they will punish you. If you did something good, they will reward you. I'll give an example. If, for example, you killed someone, this ancestral spirit could haunt you and also kill you if you didn't confess. In fact, sometimes I'll enjoy watching the Nigerian movies. Those Nigerian movies, there are some movies where people commit crimes, but at the end of the day, they tell them to confess before they die. Sometimes they get very many problems until they are squeezed to the wall and they feel they have to confess before they die. And they'll start telling, I killed so and so, I did this, I bewitched so and so, I made this one not to produce. And they confess their sins. What is making them to do that? The ancestral spirits, which don't tolerate evil in society. If someone bewitched or killed someone and kept quiet, this ancestral spirit will haunt them until people will know them. Or they will die a very nasty death. So, because people knew that this ancestral spirit, because when in the beginning we told you that the dead were taken to be more strong, more powerful than the living. So because the people believed that these ancestral spirits are very powerful and more powerful than they could imagine, then they were very conscious in whatever they were doing because they would easily be punished. So because of that fear, it maintained peace and stability. Then another point, they would punish wrongdoers by sending them a number of calamities, like impotence. If you're a wrongdoer, there are certain things they will punish you with. They will punish you like impotence, barrenness, poor harvest, drought, among others. If you are a person who is very wrongdoer, you can go without producing children. You can suffer from impotence. You can become blind. You can suffer from diseases and you get paralyzed. All those were punishments which were believed to have come from the ancestors. They also promoted good behavior in the society by advocating for proper follow-up of the set norms and customs of the society. I'll tell you, members, that in Africa, we have our norms and customs. If you don't follow those norms and customs, you are believed to be, and people will be forced to follow them. I'll give an example. Among the issue, circumcision is one of the good practice. And if you are not circumcised, you'll be haunted. Sometimes they follow up, they think you are bringing. And why? And haven't you ever asked yourself, why are the Jewish community concerned if some people are not circumcised? They know that they have to keep the set norms of the society. So you ask yourself, why are they why don't they mind their own business? You say someone, they even trace you in Kampala where you are, and if they don't get you, even when they find you in the taxi park, they can circumcise you from there. That's how serious they are. What do they want? They want to promote good behavior in the society. They want to make people follow the proper set norms and the customs of the society. So it helped people to promote, because they knew that if you didn't follow those names of the tribe or of the family, then problems will before all the family members. So that's why that corporate responsibility was very key in African traditional society. Another one, they would also bless the living, especially when the living lived in the harmony with them. Such blessing included good rainfall, good harvest, children, among others. The ancestors would bless people who were living in harmony with them, who pleased them. They would bless them. People who give sacrifices, people who behave at their best, who honor those ancestral spirits, they will get blessings. So that is exactly what that brings us to the ancestors. That one brings us to the end of the ancestors in African traditional society. And from there, I want us to compare. There are questions which come and say, compare unending life in traditional Africa and Christianity. They can just bring that question. Compare unending life in African traditions, in traditional Africa and Christianity. Or they can say compare and contrast unending life in traditional Africa and Christianity. Now, members, I want to tell you this, that sometimes when they use these two different phrasing of the question, some people think the examiner is looking for something different. When they say compare unending life in traditional Africa and Christianity, give the similarities and give the differences. And when they say compare and contrast unending life in traditional Africa and Christianity, you can still go ahead and say the similarities and the differences. Now, when the examiners say compare, and if the examiners say compare and contrast, they mean the same thing. We have had challenges when we are marking, because they tell us when the students are told to compare, they give only similarities. And they fail because they don't give us the other side of. But the word compare means give similarities and differences. And when they say compare and contrast, still give the same similarities and differences. I hope I'm very clear on that. If they ask you a question on that, don't fail it, members. So we begin with the similarities. Similarity number one, they both believe that there's life after death. When you go to the Africans, they know there's life after death. If you go to the Christians, they still believe there's life after death. So death is not considered as the end of life. In both, the Christians definitely know when you die, there is life after death. The Africans know when you die, there is life after death. So they both believe that there is life after death. That is a similarity. Secondly, in both, the names of the dead are given to places, children, buildings, and lakes as a way of remembering them. For example, St. Balikudembe of Owino, that is Owino Market. St. Balikudembe was sometime living. Then you have the Lumu Street. There was a bishop called Janan Luwum who died, so they named it after the street. Some of you must be having names of people who died in the Christian faith. Some of you are called John, you are called Peter. Those are disciples who died long time ago. Some of you are called Dorcas. Some of you are called Joseph. Those people who died, those are Christian names of people who died ago. Some of you are called Mary. Some of you are called Emmanuel. Those are names of the dead people. When we can, and they can name them on the street, they can name them to people. But even the Africans have named after, for example, we have places like what? There's a building called Mutasa Cafe. There's even a statue. That person who died. So the names are given to the buildings. There are even other names given to schools. There is, for example, in Kalangala, is it Kalangala district? There is a school named Serwanga Rwanga Senior Secondary School. That person died, and many others. So what am I trying to bring out? That in both the Christians and the African traditional people, they give names to the places, children, buildings, and so forth. Lakes. We have Lake Wamala. We have Lake and so forth. Lake Cho, Lake Wamala. Wamala is the name of a person, and so forth. Then another similarity. In both, there is casting out of demons from possessed people. For the Africans, they offered sacrifices and prayer as a way of removing bad spirits from individuals. In the same way, Christians also believe that evil spirits can be removed from an individual through prayers. Now, in both, they cast out demons, and I've tried to explain that if someone is possessed by spirits in African traditional society, when someone is possessed by the spirit, what happens? When someone is possessed, they can pray. They can pray. They can also offer sacrifices. The same way in Christianity, people are prayed for and evil spirits are cast out. So in both, they cast out demons. Another point we can look at is in both, shrines are built. In both, shrines are built as a way of respecting and recognizing ancestors among the living. I'll give an example. The Africans build shrines where they worship their ancestor. But even in Namugongo, we have the Namugongo shrine. Namugongo shrines were built in the memory of Uganda Martyrs. For African, shrines are built in compounds. So Africans can build those thatched houses in their compounds to respect the ancestral spirits. But also we have the Namugongo shrine, where we recognized the people who died, the Uganda Martyrs who died so many years ago. So in both, they build shrines. And when you explain, don't just say, in both they build shrines and you end there. Try to explain which shrines. Give an example of Namugongo shrine. Give the example of the shrines which are built in African family compounds. Another point, both African and Christian believe that there is one destiny into the next world, and that is good behavior on earth. They both believe that when you are well behaved on earth, then you have a very good destiny. They all believe that if someone behaves badly, will live a bad life after life. If you come to the Christians, we believe that when you die and you are a very good person, you'll go to heaven. And if you are a bad person, you go to hell. That's what the Christians believe. But also the Africans believe that when you are a good person, your spirit will continue living, and you can easily interact with them living easily. But if you lived a bad life, you were a witch, you were a murderer, you were what? People will never they will not even name after you the people. They will not even name you after the children. They will leave you to be there, to your life to disappear like that. So they encourage people to live a very good life. if they must have a good unending life. Another point, death in both societies is looked at as changing from physical body to a spirit. They believe that the next world, the life after death, is spiritual. Before you die, you are physical. The body is there. But when you live after death, life will live in the spiritual life. So that's what death in both societies looked at as changing from physical body into the spirit or the soul. Prayers used to attain eternal life in both societies. People pray to their ancestral spirit to go to the unending life. Then last we will say funeral rites performed. Now, funeral rites, even in the Christians perform funeral rites. We have the memorial services among the Christians, but we also have the funeral rites among the Africans. So the Africans and the Christians both perform the funeral rites. And I'll give an example. When we have the memorial services, people pray, they even put the heirs and pray for them. That is the Christian. But also the Africans do it in a traditional way. So either way, funeral rites are performed by both the traditional, the African traditional and the Christians. Then another one, sacrifices are offered. Sacrifices are offered in both the African and Christian society. The African offered sacrifices like cattle, goats, chicken, while Christians are reminded to pay tithes. Now, for us, our sacrifice is the offering and the tithes. So, in both ways, they both offer sacrifices to prepare for an ending life. So, in fact, the Christians believe that, in fact, when you go to among the Catholics, if you have not been paying the tithes, they even don't pray for your body. You must have evidence that you have been paying the what? The tithes. If you are not paying the tithes, some of the priests may not even pray for you. Have you ever gone to a various ceremony where they invited the Catholic priest and the Catholic priest said, I don't know that one. As he never received any tithes from him. And they didn't pray. So sacrifices are offered. In Africans, they sacrifice animals and birds, and the Christians, they pay tithes. Now let us look at the difference, because the question was telling us, compare Africa and the Christian understanding of an ending life. And we have seen the similarities. Let us look at the differences. Africans bury the dead with items such as spears, food, stools, whereas the Christians believe that unending life is absolutely spiritual. It has nothing to do with material possession. You realize that Africans, they used to think that life is going to continue in the physical form. So they will bury the dead with items, food, stools, plates, knives. Thank you. So what does that mean? That the Christians look at unending life to be completely spiritual, whereas the Africans look at it as physical. So that is a difference. Whereas the Africans believe that the dead were reborn through their children and grandchildren, Christians believe that people remain children of God. They are not reborn. I'll give an example. When a great parent dies and children are born, they are named after, they think children are reborn by giving birth. That's why people who don't have children feel they will die completely. I think we looked at that when we were beginning this topic. People who are reborn die completely. People who don't have children die completely. People who have children they think they are reborn in their children. But the Christians believe that all of us are children of God. There's no being reborn. That business is not there. We remain the children of God. Then secondly, another point would say, to the Africans, the dead were considered to be active members of the family. While to the Christians, the good spirits joined God in his heavenly kingdom. Africans believe that when someone dies, he has died. The dead have no connection with the living. In fact, for us Christians, when you dream a dead person, the following morning you just wake up and pray. You wake up and pray and cancel out the spirit of death. That's what Christians do. But the Africans believe that when the dead people come to them, they are speaking to them, they are delivering messages. Then for them, they believe that the dead people are still part of the family. To Christians, it is not the same. If you die and your spirit joins to heavenly kingdom, it rejoins the heavenly world, it joins the spiritual world. There's no connection between the dead and the living. According to the Christians, however, the Africans still cherish those spirits of the dead. They believe that they are part of them. And by the way, Africans, when they dream that they get so excited. But for Christians, they feel those are evil spirits. The dead has no connection with the living. Let the dead remain dead and the living remain living. So no connection. There's supposed to be no connection. Another difference, traditional Africans believed that the dead had influence over the living. In other words, they were more powerful than the living. While Christians don't have this belief written anywhere. Or we can say, they have this belief is not written anywhere in the book, the Bible. There's no saying that, when the people die, they are more powerful, so they should. No. The Africans believe that, but Christians don't believe in that. So we may not use the word don't have this belief written anywhere. We can say Christians believe that the spiritual world has no connection to the living world. Next, the dead among the Africans used to demand for blood sacrifices. For example, the dead people, the ancestral spirit, could demand for sacrifices in case they are not happy, in case they are grieved and they are annoyed. They will demand for sacrifices, animals, even human sacrifices. Whereas among the Christian, they believe in Jesus as the last sacrifice to God in the form of blood. Christians don't believe in blood sacrifices. The only sacrifice which was sacrificial is the death of Jesus Christ. He shed the blood for each and every one, even people who are not yet born. We believe that the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross is enough for them to come out of their problems they are having. So there's a difference. The dead demand for blood sacrifices among the Africans, whereas Christians, they believe that Jesus Christ is the enough sacrifice for them. Another difference is in Christianity, the soul of the living. In Christianity, the soul of the living dead is believed to go to either hell or heaven. While among the Africans, souls of the dead people moved or lingered around the homestead, mountains, rivers, lakes, forests. Now, Christians believe that when people die, they either go to heaven or to hell. That's what Christians believe. While when we come to the Africans, the spirit of the dead linger around. They linger around homesteads. In fact, in some African culture, they usually have a very big tree in the compound. And they believe that tree is where those spirits of the dead people in the family come and rest in the shade during day. Some people think the spirit can be in the trees, can be in the rivers, can be in the mountains, can be at the wells. You realize that some villages, they tell people not to go to the well during midday. maybe between noon and 2. They believe at that time the spirits of the dead have gone to take water. So when you go there, you may find the spirits there and they may be angry. So we grew up knowing that, we don't go to the well between noon and 2. Why? Because the spirits of the dead are also come at that time to take water. So some rivers, they believe there are some spirits there. The lakes, the forests, the rocks, they believe that some dead people, their spirits are lingering there. So that is the difference between Christianity, belief in a life after death, and the African traditional society. Among the Africans, they believe that the dead could pay visits to their families through dreams and visions. Whereas among the Christians, the dead have no relationship with the living. Members among the Africans, they believe that the dead could pay visits to their families through dreams and visions. Whereas among the Christians, the dead have no relationship with the living. Yes, the Africans could even yearn to dream. I told you they would pray in those shrines and say, please talk to us. If the spirit has not wanted someone to speak, then when they sleep, they'll get those dreams and visions and they'll speak to them. And the ancestral spirit will guide them. Whereas what do Christians believe? They have no relationship with the living. The dead and the living have no relationship. So they don't believe in the dead people speaking to them through visions. In fact, when they do speak, those are demons. Just pray and cast out the demons of death. And by the way, it has been proved that many times when people dream dead people, bad things happen to them. So if you're a Christian, don't tolerate speaking with dead people in dreams. It has a very negative impact on your spiritual life. So that is the difference. Now, before we go to church history, I want to tell you that when they ask you compare the belief in unending life in African traditional society and Christianity, those are the answers you are supposed to give. If they say compare and contrast, it requires the same answers, members. It requires the same answers. Don't say, because I have not put the contrast, I should only give similarities. Some people think that when you say compare, they want only similarities. And when they put on contrast, they want the differences. No. When they say compare, you are required to look at both the similarities and the differences. And when we are marking such questions, maybe I want to comment on this. When you give the similarities, you get a tick. You can maybe give even an example. But I want us to look at the differences mainly. When you're looking at the differences, there's something different. With the differences, we give 2 ticks in the differences. I want us to go back maybe to the first points we looked at. Now, when I'm marking a question of difference, if I say give the differences between, they may not even give you to compare. They may say give the differences in the belief of unending life between the Africans and the Christians. And then you say, point number 1, Africans bury the dead with items such as spear, food, and stools, whereas Christians believe that unending life is absolutely spiritual. Then I'll give a tick. Africans bury the dead with items. I'll put a tick there. And then I'll put another tick So I'll put the tick here, bury the dead with items. Then I'll put another tick. Christians believe that unending life is absolutely spiritual. I'll put a second tick here. So when we are giving differences, we get two ticks in one paragraph. Where do we give the tick? We put a tick where there's a contrast. You have to show us what happens in African traditional society, and you give us what happens in the Christian. We don't tolerate answers like, which is not the case in Christianity, which is vice versa. We don't mark such points. You lose both, by the way. We don't even give one tick. If you can't get the two ticks, you don't get anything. So when you're answering these questions, make sure you give the contrast very well. Whereas Africans believe that the dead were reborn through their children, you give that point, you give a tick, put a tick where there is reborn through their children. And then we say, and grandchildren. Whereas Christians believe that children people remain the children of God. We can also put a tick there. To Africans, they were considered active members of the family. You can put a tick in active members of family. Then to Christians, good spirit joined God in his heavenly kingdom. You put a tick to join the God in his heavenly kingdom. So you usually give two ticks in the differences. So when you're answering questions of contrast or the differences, make sure you bring out what happens in the African traditional society, what happens in Christianity, what happens opposite the contrast. You bring out the contrast, and you get two ticks. In fact, questions of differences, you don't even require to give very many paragraphs, because 5 paragraphs can give you 10 marks. If they just ask you part B, give the differences. Give only. I always tell students to give like 5 to 7 points, and you get all the 10 marks. 5 marks, 5 points, 5 paragraphs can give you 10 marks. You don't have to write a lot. So that's what they separate in this question of the contrast. Members, we are about to end our lesson. And before we end, I'll talk a bit about the tradition Africa. We'll talk about the church history, because that's where we are going. And we're going to look at unending life in church history. And we are going to look at some questions. How did the different groups of people in early church understand the theme of life after death? And when we look at the church history, members, we have church history in 3 categories. When we talk about church history, we have the church history, the early church. We have the early church. In fact, when we talk about church history, it has 3 parts. The first part is the early church. So sometimes the examiners may not ask you a question which is general, like a church history. No, they may be specific. So unending life we have early church, and the early church is the church where we have the apostles, the Peters, the Paul. We read about the early church in the Acts of Apostles. If you have your Bibles, go to Acts of the Apostles and read those activities of Acts of the Apostles. You find that those apostles were there. So the early church involves those Christians who lived the life when Jesus has just ascended into heaven. So those Peter, the John, the Paul, the Stephen, that is the early church. And we read the activities of the early church in the Bible. And I want you to take note of this, because it confuses very many students. Then the second type of a church is the middle church. And under the middle church, we have the monks and nuns. We have those personalities like Augustine of Hippo, Saint Francis of Assisi, Saint Clement of Alexandria, and many more. Bishop Cyprian of Carthage. That is the middle church. The middle church of Christians, monks and nuns, St. Francis of Assisi, St. Augustine of Hippo, St. Bruno, and so forth. Now that is the middle church. And usually when we are studying, they have different settings. Then the third church is the modern church. Now under the modern church, we have the missionaries. So the missionary work is under the modern church. Are we together? So when we move to look at unending life in church history, we have to bear that in mind. Now, the question is, how did the different groups of people in the early church understand the theme of life after death? Now, when I'm talking about the early church, now I'm talking about those Christians. The one we see after Jesus had ascended into heaven. Those are the early church. That is the early church. It is the church history I've told you has three churches: the early church, the middle church, and modern church. Now, this question is directed to the early church. And members, I'm going to give you, as we move on, I'm going to give you a formula. Because many times students don't like questions on the early church, but they are the easiest questions to pass. And I'm going to teach you the trick of passing this section of early church, of the church history. You realize that it's very easy. That even if you are the weakest student in CRE, at least you can get a mark in the church history questions. I'll be giving you the formula to do that. But now, as we wind up our lesson, we are going to look at, we have this question: how did the different groups of people in the early church understand the theme of life after death? We are going to look at that. And when you understand what the early church means, questions will be easily answered. And we are saying that at the time of Jesus Christ, most people believed in life after death. And this was because of his miracles, teaching on salvation, and his resurrection after being crucified in front of the crowd. Now, when Jesus was alive, Jesus used to talk about, people believed in life after death. Why? Because there are some people he resurrected from the dead. Even the messages he would preach to, the miracles he performed, the teaching of salvation, his teachings made people to believe that at one day they're going to live. And his resurrection believed that people, sincerely, Christians are not going to die completely. They are going to rise at one time. So, Christians believed that there was life after death. After Jesus had ascended to heaven, people got confused. Different people started living, giving different ideas according to what they thought and what they had seen. This group of people included, now we are going to look at different group of people. We are going to look at different people. But what you have to bear in mind, we have not yet answered this question. This question, we are going to come to it later. But I want to give us the background. The different people, how they believed in life after death. Their different beliefs, what were they? And in your free time, I want you to do research, or look through your notes. How did the people in the early church look at unending life? How are their beliefs? We have different categories of people. We have the Egyptians, we have the people in Greece, we have different people who believed in life after Jesus had ascended to heaven. How did people look at unending life? What did they believe in? You tell us. How did they believe in life after death? You realize that very many people came up with different ideologies, with different understandings of life after death. Some were misleading, by the way, and others were on the right track. But all the same, people had different beliefs about life after death. Members who want to wind up, we are remaining with few minutes, and we are going to look at the Egyptians. The Egyptians believed in life after death. They believed that the soul could live on earth as long as it never faced any natural hazard. So let us, members, we shall look at this the next time we meet. Try to look at this question: how did the different groups of people in the LH Standard Sunday theme? We are going to continue from there. Thank you for being a good class, and God bless you. Thank you very much.